In this video, we're going to learn how we can look up multiple rows using multiple criteria. So here we have everything set up. We have a data sheet with a list of order transactions. And at the bottom, we have a lookup based on two criteria. One is the customer and then the product. So based on the selection, it displays the order details. So if I just go in and change this to company D and change the product to doublers, you can see that it updates it accordingly. Perfect. So let's go at it step by step and see how we can arrive at this. So the first step would be to identify the Boolean values using the criteria. So the only difference here is that we have two criteria to work on. So let's go ahead and do this formula and then we will explain it a little more in detail. So the first criteria is select the company. So we'll freeze the cell and we'll check whether it equals any of the customers in our table. And then what we're going to do is we're going to multiply this with the next criteria. Okay, so we'll multiply that with the next criteria. Function f4 will freeze the cell equals the product. Okay, then I'm just going to put a bracket around it. Okay, so now when I execute this and if I run function F9, I can see that it stands true for the second and the fourth row. So is that right? So if you look at it, 1001 is the second row and 1003 is the fourth. So it is correct. So it has actually fetched true values for the correct rows. Okay, so now we need to understand what is the logic behind this. For that, we'll just do this manually. So we'll select company D and here I'll put in product as doublers. Okay, so company D we'll mark wherever it is true. So it is true for the first three, and for doublers it is true for the first, second, fourth and fifth. The remaining are all false, so we'll just mark them. Okay, perfect. So now the whole idea is we want to get only ones. So for that we can just multiply the Boolean values that were returned for both of these criteria, because 1 times 1 is 1 and 1 times 0 is going to return a 0. So we'll just multiply it. Okay, I'll just put short forms here. Okay, so when we multiply this, what we get is zeros for all rows that contain false and ones for those which contain true for both the criteria. So this is exactly what we got when we applied the formula as well. Okay, so since we've got that sorted, we'll just go ahead and work on the next step, which is to extract row numbers of the matching transactions. So we had seen this in the previous video as well. So we'll just select the rows here of any one column and then we'll minus it by 1 because we are only referring to the rows of the data table. And then, oh, we forgot to copy the formula here, so it'll be easier instead of typing it in. Okay, so we'll just say a row of this particular column minus 1 divided by the Boolean values that we have extracted. Okay, so again we get an array. So here you go. So you get the correct row numbers now, right? Row number 2 and row number 4, which is correct. This is row number 2 and row number 4 against which we need to fetch the values, and the remaining are all errors. So we know using the aggregate function we can ignore all the errors. Okay, so we got that also sorted. We'll just copy this formula. Perfect. Now we're going to use the aggregate function. Okay, function number 15, 6 to ignore errors, and the array formula we already worked on, we'll just paste that. And the K series, the sequence, I want the first one. For now, I'll just mention it as 1 and press enter. Okay, so I get the second row, which is right. So the first row it's going to pick up is row number 2 for these for this criteria. So let's go and change this and see. Let's change this to company L. So company L, the first record is in row number 1 of the table. So yes, it's picked up the first row. So it's working exactly how we wanted. And then the next step is to use the index function to extract the desired column information. So we'll just copy what we have worked on, and then let's go to index, and the array is orders, row number. So we don't have to manually type in the row number, we'll just copy the formula that we worked on. And column number, we'll just take the order ID for now. Order ID is the first column in the data table. So we'll just manually type it in for now. Okay, there you go. So it's picked up the first order ID. So if I just go and change this, I can see the values are changing. So up to now, our formula is working perfectly. The last step is to display matching rows one below the other without errors. So now what do we mean by that? So it's not always necessary you get a fixed number of records based on a criteria. Maybe it's 1 record, 2 records, 3 records. We don't know how many records it might actually fetch. Okay, so what we need to do is to ensure that there are no errors. Okay, so in order to understand that, let's copy this formula. Okay, just going to copy this formula over here. I'll just get rid of this for now. So here, if I were to drag it down, okay, so now here I'm getting the same thing because I had manually put in the sequence as 1. We can go and automate that as well. So if I just go and say change it to 2, it's going to return an error for me. So we need to be able to automate that as well in terms of how it moves down in the sequence and what rows it picks up. Okay, so that is why we have actually listed the total number of records here. So over here we have a very simple function using countifs. So we used both the criterias using countifs to actually find out how many records stand true. So basically it's the same concept of the Boolean values. So here it returned the value as 1 for both these conditions. So now we should not show more records than what is listed here. Okay, so that is the first thing that we need to achieve. So what we should do here is let's create an if statement. So we'll say if this value, so we'll just freeze that as well. Okay, so if it is greater or equal to the number of rows that we drag down, yeah, only then it should actually retrieve the records. Otherwise, it should not show any errors. Okay, so for now, we'll just build the if statement. So we'll say if this is equal to greater than or equal to row of, okay, let's do that. Okay, we'll freeze the first row, function F4. Oh, so we missed the condition here. So we'll say yes, we'll say no. Okay, so we're just building on the logic here. So it says that yes, there is one record, so we can show a record in this particular row. But if I drag it down, it says no, there is no record, so it cannot show anything. So what did we do here? So it is clearly understood that we picked up the total number of records that match the criteria, but what did we achieve with the rows D13 colon D13? So now what happens is the moment you drag down that formula, you can see one of the cells have been frozen. So D13 to D14 is going to be, it's going to return value as 2 because it is 2 rows. So it's like saying 1, if 1 is greater than or equal to 2, then uh, since it is false, it will return as no. So this is exactly how we want our rows also to work, right? So we can apply the same set of the same function actually for our order ID as well. So now if we go in, instead of manually typing the sequence as 1, we can go and paste that over here, correct? So if we do that, okay, rows of D13 to D14, and let's see what we got wrong there. Okay, so right, doesn't seem like we've got anything wrong. Okay, D13 to D14, yes. So the thing is, we just got that formula wrong here, so let's go and correct it quickly. So the first row is going to be D13. Okay, perfect. So we got that. So now if I drag it down, okay, I still get the error because I have not used the if statement. Okay, so if I go and change this now to company L and I change this to doublers, you can see the values showing up. So, okay, we'll just get rid of the sales one for now. So the order IDs are displaying correctly. But then if I continue to drag this down, I'm going to get errors. Okay. But here, the if statement that I worked on, if I drag it down, it's going to give no's. Yeah, it's going to give no's for that. So all we need to do is implement this if statement into our function. So we'll just do that. We'll just copy this and we'll implement it here. Okay, and now outside this we will, so if it doesn't satisfy the condition, we'll just put blanks over there so it doesn't return anything. So we'll just do that. Now if I drag it down, it will not return any error messages. So you can drag it down as much as you want depending on the amount of transactions you have. So it always picks up the formula, right? And or you could even convert it into a table if you want to, even that's possible. So let's take this formula for sales. So the only thing that probably we need to change here is instead of order ID here, so we have the order ID, we have the customer, and we have the product. So we just need to change the column number here. So we change the column number and we are good to go, right? So this is how we go about it. So if you don't want to manually give the column number, you can also use the column and indirect function. So we skip that to keep it simple for now. So this is the series of steps that you would be following. So when you have multiple criteria and you want to display the rows one below the other, there are just about 5 simple steps to go ahead with. So once you build a logic like this, it'll be very easy to work with even very complex criteria.